Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Gabby Barra's newest video talking about the 7 things I want to see in HSR going forward. I got inspired through a video I saw that someone made for WUWA with this version. Now, I'm not as experienced or enlightened with WUWA as I am HSR, so I thought let me translate this into an HSR video, right? So, let's start off with number 1, and keep in mind, this isn't in any specific ranking. I just fucking wrote this shit down for things I thought of off the top of my head. So, to begin with, we have guaranteed Lyone banners. As someone who has been a victim of the 75-25 banner and in fact has a negative Lyone win rate on the main account, I can happily say I would be quite, excited, quite appreciative if they made the Lyone banner guaranteed. At this far into the game, I don't see why they couldn't do this. Of course, that would make them lose money, so they don't want to. However, it would be very, very much appreciated, especially by some of us with really bad luck, because in WUWA, for example, I can just pull that weapon banner, right? I know I openly talk about how, the guaranteed weapon banner in WUWA, it can be a bit bait because the game's not even a year and a half old yet, and they've already reached like HSR Lyone levels of jumps. However, still, it does not take away the value guaranteed has, right? Like, you can pull on this banner and it's simply a matter of how early or late you get it, instead of having that thought at the back of your mind, am I going to lose, right? So guaranteed Lyone banner, I think this far in the game would be 100% a fair thing. I still think they would make a lot of money because of eidolons, right? The eidolons in this game, the jumps you get from them are already quite big, so I feel like this alone is enough to sell really well, and people would be more inclined, in my opinion, to go for Lyone banner more often in this game if it was guaranteed, right? Maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but I don't feel like I am. Lyone banner being guaranteed would make a lot more people less fearful of it and more open to pulling, right? So after the guaranteed Lyone, I got capturing radiance once again. Personal experience. I have gone on some of the most insane 50-50 loss streaks of my life in HSR. I've gone on 7 50-50 loss streaks, 5 50-50 loss streaks. I think this has actually happened to me twice, right? So as you can tell, I haven't had the best of experiences with the 50-50 gacha in this game. And in Genshin, they have this system called capturing radiance, in which I believe after your third 50-50 loss or fourth 50-50 loss, obviously you'll have your guarantee for the next pull. However, alongside this, the next pull after this one should also be guaranteed or have a way higher chance of you getting that 5-star that isn't 50-50. So being able to get something like capturing radiance in HSR would be very nice for those of us who just go on unlucky streaks at times, and it really just sets you back quite a lot, right? Moving on, we have consistent free 5-stars. Now this is a really, really big one, and it's something I've been glazing HSR for every time I talk about it, and the difficulty of clearing endgame in this game. Before they started giving us all these free 5-stars, when second Annie came out and further, the HP inflation and power creep in this game was a very, very noticeable issue I took a lot of, well, issue with, right? And I made a lot of videos about it because it just isn't justifiable, right? Having this much power creep and HP inflation when you don't even have guaranteed weapon banners 50-50, you're not giving, an insane amount of pulls per patch for all of these things to match the power creep and HP inflation. It just doesn't feel good, right? However, since the second anniversary, they gave us the golden token, which is free Ruan Mei, and no matter what bullshit people try to agenda spread, Ruan Mei still does have really good value. Even if she doesn't have amazing value, she has good value, right? After this, we have gotten free Archer, and Archer is one of the strongest DPSs in the entirety of the game as of current, probably top 2 or top 3, right? And then after this, we are rumored to get Terravox, or the new Dan Heng preservation as we've seen in drip markets now. He is supposed to be free as well. So a limited sustain who will probably be on the same level as Hyacine in terms of value. A limited, Harmony that is one of the highest value ones in the game. Incredibly broken for APOC, really good for break teams, and even outside of this, just a good, solid option, right? And as well as one of the strongest DPSs in the game as of current, with some of the lowest zero cycle, clears. And he brings back a support from the dead, being Sparkle, right? So you can make an entire new team or second team for free, right? You can just make a second team, run Archer with Tingyan RMC plus sustain, and he can probably clear both of the current MOC sides with a cycle or two left, right? I've seen Archer get really good sustain clears at low cost, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if an average player could get 4 cycles, let's say. So this allowing you to basically not have to pull a second team is a big difference maker. It's truly underrated just how much this saves you in terms of pulling, right? On my Anoxa account, for example, this is an account completely dedicated towards Anoxa vertical investments. And because of Archer, Ruan Mei, upcoming free Dan Heng, all of this shit, right? I will be able to run my Archer team as a filler DPS for probably the next half a year to a year just fine, right? And it's because of him being free, because of him just being added into my account, that I can freely focus on Anoxa and still know I'll be able to clear the endgame content no matter what. And I'll always have this top tier DPS I didn't even need to pull or pay for. Truthfully, I hope they continue this, free 5-star trend that they're doing, because I really, really like it. And I have talked about this before. I like this more than getting new 4-stars, because if we consistently get new 5-stars and they actually, make their kits and base their kits off of current meta, which is what they did for Archer and what they've done for every single free character, then this means that 4-stars will always just give 1 pull refund, and you'll also get actual good free 5-stars that will last way longer and be meta, and way stronger compared to any 4-stars. Even the best of the best 4-stars, unless you're talking about Gallagher, it's going to be hard to beat value of a new limited 5-star, right? So I think I've yapped long enough about number 3, but that was a really, really big point. Next, we go into better substat reroller. For those who don't know, we did get variable dice in, I believe, 3.0, right? Or maybe that was 3.2? I don't remember, right? But we got variable dice, and basically this is an item that allows you to re-roll the substats on a piece, right? So if you have a double crit natural 4-liner and it all went to shit, you can use a variable dice and basically just re-roll that incredibly rare piece that you don't think you're gonna get again for a long time to come, and hope that it, you know, rolls into the right crit shit, right? So the problem with this is it's incredibly expensive, right? It's really fucking expensive to craft a variable dice. It's basically worth 3 self-modeling resin. So most people are only going to be able to craft one of these things a patch, and there's a really solid chance that it still doesn't roll well or how you wish it to be, and it will still be a very replaceable piece nonetheless. So unless you hit like the god roll and you get like 3+ crit rolls into a piece, or like speed rolls, whatever it is you're trying to roll for, then the variable dice, you basically just end up wasting 3 self-modeling resin, and it's just never recommended, right? It really isn't recommended using variable dice, and what's much more recommended is saving more of your resin so that you can craft incredibly rare pieces, right? For example, something I struggle with universally, no matter the character, is getting a main stat orb with the right substats, and alongside this, getting rolls into those substats, right? I have farmed the Rutilant domain probably like near a month's worth of Trailblaze power, and alongside this, I've generated probably 100+ Rutilant orbs, which is around 10,000 relic remains, trying to get a physical damage boost orb with double crit, and I haven't gotten a single one in all of that bullshit. Orbs in this game are incredibly fucking rare, so I'd much more highly recommend you use your resin on that, or you could use it on boots as well, speed boots with double crit, maybe a chest piece with, you know, certain stats, right? Like for example, Anaxa, I think he could very well use a, you know, crit damage or crit rate piece with a crit and attack percent substat, as he benefits from attack percent a lot, right? Like he is really hungry for attack percent, and it makes a big difference in his performance. So you could craft a chest piece like that, right? You get the gist. I just want a better way to re-roll substats, unlike the variable dice we have now, because it's pretty underwhelming and overly expensive, right? Next, we go into probably the most obvious issue. I want less HP inflation in this game. Everybody knows it, I know it, you know it. This game's HP inflation, it's constantly clowned on, and it's for a reason. They really just don't fucking care, right? Now, we'll see whether or not version 3 ends up having technically less percentage HP inflation compared to version 2. However, I doubt it. I wouldn't be surprised if version 3 had the same HP inflation, if not more. Obviously, I'll make a video on this to cover it if I remember down the line. However, I don't know, man. I just don't like it, right? I've talked about it openly before. Wuwa has the easiest endgame of all the gachas I've played. HSR, I can 100% see how the average Joe finds it taxing, right? And I do still think it's perfectly clearable, especially with the recent free units, of like really making it easier on people for their second teams. However, it still doesn't change how big of an issue the HP inflation is, and I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like they would still get incredibly similar sales for like their newer characters and shits with the normal power creep they already do, even if they didn't make the HP inflation as egregious, right? Maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. I don't think it hurt them that much to lessen the HP inflation, right? Next, we go into faster old character buffs. Now, this is another pretty noticeable problem. The fact that we are getting character buffs is, of course, nice, but they are so spaced out that it's kind of annoying, right? Like, we should be able to get these buffs in much, much faster rotations, but instead, this first batch of buffs, Kafka, Silverwolf Blade, and Jingliu, right? this first batch of buffs was announced like 2 patches ago, and we still don't know when the next batch of buffs will be. The only thing we know is that Firefly would apparently be getting buffed in early version 4. So the fact that we haven't gotten buffs announced yet, and it took them like 2 patches after announcement to finally finish, buffing like Kafka, Silverwolf, all these other characters, right? It's starting to make me believe, even though I don't want to believe it, that the next batch of buffs actually does have Firefly in it, meaning it's like half a year away, which would be very bad in my opinion, right? Now, I've already been open about the characters I think I need, the characters I think need buffs. You have Dill, you have Topaz, you have Jiaoqiu, probably Argenti. Obviously, we know Firefly is going to be getting buffed. I don't find this surprising. I'm quite confident we're going into a break meta in early version 4. Blah, 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 right? But yeah, that's about it. I just want faster rotations for these character buffs, because otherwise we're going to be waiting a bajillion years before Acheron gets buffed, right? Next, this is one many will resonate with, being more events, right? I have already made a video on this recently. I've made multiple videos on this topic. This game's events, its content, it is incredibly fucking dry the second you finish a main patch story quest, right? There is genuinely almost nothing to do. We get 2 events. Sometimes the quality of HSR's events are genuinely very high, and I really enjoy playing their events. It's just that the quantity is not there, and for how much this game makes them, it makes no sense, right? Like, I am fully aware of the trend of Hoyo just, giving their older games worse treatment compared to their newer ones, because they want to capture like a dedicated audience for their newer one, so then they can milk that game and move on to a newer one and treat that one better. However, HSR is currently making tens of millions consistently every single patch, right? Even on its weak patches, it's doing like 20-30 million, yet they are so stingy with this game's content. I find it hard to understand why, right? Now, don't get me wrong, subjectively, I don't mind not having that many events, because I run multiple HSR accounts. I have an IRL, a trigger warning, right? Trigger word, job, right? I have a job outside. I have multiple HSR accounts. I have WUA accounts. I make videos on, these accounts and these games. So I'm quite full, right? My schedule is quite full 24/7. And so this, not so many events can be very relieving for me. However, if I'm being honest, I think maybe 1 or 2 more events wouldn't kill me at all in the slightest, and this would also be able to appease a lot of people who just find this game basically completely dead the second they finish a main story patch quest, right? Because they aren't wrong. This game is dead if you aren't a meta player, saving every day, theory crafting, looking at leaks, oh, this character does this and that. If you aren't doing that, this game genuinely does just become pretty boring, right? And maybe that is what, Hoyo is trying to do. I've been very open on my opinion about this. I do think the reason Hoyo treats HSR this way is not only because they want to milk it for money, even though that is probably the main reason. It's also that this is kind of marketed as like the side game out of all the Hoyo games, right? I think this is like the side game in which, like Genshin, you have the open world, which obviously requires most people PC or just more attention, right? And then in ZZZ, you have more interactive combat and way more events compared to HSR, while HSR is turn-based and it has auto battle, right? So this game, in terms of convenience, turning your brain off and doing whatever, it's probably the most and best Hoyo game at this. So I can understand that perspective. However, still, it's not going to kill them to add 1 or 2 more events in a patch consistently. And even if it might not, be the greatest thing for me, it's not going to kill me at the end of the day. I'll be able to spare an extra hour or 2 to finish those events, and most people would be much more happier with more content, right? So those are the 7 things I want to see HSR add or continue doing going into the future. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. What do you guys have as your own list or your own things you want to see them do going into the future? I know a lot of people have different opinions. I know a lot of people got different ideas, so it's something I'd love to hear. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.